Hi, Algebra 2 Trig. We're going to start a new chapter. It's called Sequences and Series, but we're going to start with 9.1, just sequences. Okay, before we start, please write down the definition of a sequence. And then pretty much what a sequence means, it's a collection of numbers that has an order to it. Okay, so in the first example, what we're going to do is we're going to just write the first few terms. So it's going to be write the first. We'll do 3 terms of the sequence a sub n equals, that's a little n by the way, 5n minus 3. Okay, so what you have to understand is a sub n is the rule for my sequence. This whole thing is the rule, okay? And it wants us to write the first 3 terms. Well, the first term is a sub 1. The 1 means it's our first term, okay? So I'm literally just going to plug in 1 for n. So it'll be 5 times 1 minus 3, which is 2. So my first term is 2. And then I have to write 2 more terms because I wrote 1 term so far. So the next term is a sub 2, which is the second term. I'm going to plug it in again. So 5 times 2 minus 3. So that's 7. And then a sub 3 is 5 times 3 minus 3. And that is 15 minus 3. So that's 12. And I'm pretty much done. So again, this is the rule for my sequence. Okay, and then these are my first 3 terms. The other thing you're going to do today is you're going to actually write a rule for the sequence. So we're going to go backwards. So if I had something like, so it says write an expression for the following sequence. Okay, so there are certain rules that you have to follow, so I'll just give you a couple examples. So let's do something like 3, 7, 11, 15, ... Okay, so that's a sequence, and I'm going to write an expression for that. And then let's do another one where it's 5, 10, 20, 40, ... The ... actually means it just goes on and on forever. Okay? And then I'll do another one where it's negative 4, and then 16, negative 64, ... Okay, so let's go over the rules. So right now I want to try to find an order to it. So what is happening from one term to the next? So if I'm looking at this sequence right here, it looks like 3 plus 4 is 7, 7 plus 4 is 11, and 11 plus 4 is 15. Well, whenever you are adding, you're going to put that number in front of n. Okay, so I'm going to take a 4, and I'm going to put it in front of n. Okay, and then if I, just like the previous problem, remember you plugged in 1 for the first term. Well, if I plug in 1, 4 times 1 is 4. That is not my first term. So I have to add or subtract to get back to my first term. So if I plug in 1, I'll end up with 4, but in order to get back to 3, I'm going to minus 1. So that is actually my rule. A sub n equals 4n minus 1. And I would always check. So if I plug in 1, do I get 3? If I plug in 2, do I get 7? Yes, I do. Because 4 times 2 is 8. 8 minus 1 is 7. And then if I plug in 3, do I get 11? And if I plug in 4, do I get 15? And yes, I do. Okay, so that is if I'm adding. So if you're adding, put the number in front of n. Okay, so the next one, if I'm multiplying, I'm going to take it to the nth power. So if you look, it's 5, 10, 20, 40. So I'm multiplying by 2 because 5 times 2 is 10, 10 times 2 is 20, 20 times 2 is 40. So if I'm multiplying by 2, I'm actually going to do 2 to the n power. Okay? And again, it goes back to the same problem. If I plug in 1, I'll end up with 2, and that's not 5. Okay, so now I know the problem is some of you guys might want to do something like this. Well, if I add 3, then I will get 5, right? If I plug in 1, 2 to the first power is 2, plus 3 is 5. I would always check more than one term to see if your sequence is correct. If I plug in 2, I should get 10. So if I plug in 2, 2 squared is 4, 4 plus 3 is 7. So this is actually not my rule. It's not going to work. Well, the way I remember is if I'm multiplying, I have to probably multiply this value by something to get 5. So my a sub n is going to be originally 2 to the n, and then I'm going to multiply it. I'm going to multiply it by something to get to 5. Well, if I plug in 1, that's 2. So I got to multiply by 5 over 2. Okay? So if I multiply by 5 over 2, if I plug in 1, it would be 2 times 5 over 2, which is 5. Let's try 2 again. If I plug in 2, it would be 2 to the squared. So 2 squared is 4. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 divided by 2 is 10. That is my second term. So it looks like I did it right. Okay. And then we'll just come up with more sequences. This one, what's different is if you just look at the numbers, if I cover up the negatives, if you just look at the numbers, I am multiplying by 4. However, now I have a negative, so I have to account for that. Well, here's a quick rule. I'm going to do negative 1 to the n if the first term is negative. And then I'm going to use negative 1 to the n plus 1 if the second term is negative. Okay? So if I look at this, my first term's negative, so I'm going to write a rule for this. So it'll be a sub n. So if I look at it, I'm just going to, let's do the number part first. So forget the negative sign. It's multiplied by 4, so it's 4 to the n. So if I plug in 1, do I get 4? Yes, I do. Plug in 2, I get 16. Yes, I do. Plug in 3, I get 64. Yes, I do. Now I have to take care of the negative sign. Well, my first term is negative, and it alternates. Alternating meaning it goes negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive. Okay? So I'm going to plug in a negative 1 to the n, and then that is it. Okay, and then let's do one more. Let's do one with fractions. So something like okay, with fractions, and you know what, let's make this one negative, just to make it interesting. Okay, with fractions, I want to look at the top and the bottom individually. Okay, so if I'm looking at fractions, if I ignore the negative, if I just look at the top, it's 1, 4, 7. So what am I doing? I'm probably adding by 3. 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 plus 3 is 7. So if I want to write a rule, I'm going to separate the fraction. So the top of my rule, it looks like if I'm adding by 3, I'm going to write 3n. I'm going to put the number in front of n. Okay? And then if I look on the bottom, I'm multiplying by 3. So it's not, it's 3, 9, 27. So the bottom is 3 to the n, which is completely different. And then I just have to take care of my alternating because it goes from positive to negative to positive. So since the second one is negative, remember we write negative 1 to the n plus 1. If you're confused, you can always plug 1 in. So I would plug in 1, see if I get 1/3, and I do. Okay? And then I would plug in, actually I don't. So if I look, this is wrong. If I plug in 1, I will get 3 over 3, which is not what I wanted. I wanted 1 over 3. So I got to take care of this first. I totally forgot. So if I plug in 1 up top, it was supposed to be 147. If I plug in 1, it's 3. I want it to be 1. So I'm going to subtract 2. Okay, so if I plug in 1, I should get 1/3, and I do. If I plug in 2, I should end up with -4/9. I plug in 3, I should get 7 over 27. And that is it to writing rules. If you have any questions, please write it, and we will answer it tomorrow.